Hello guys and welcome back. We're back to our regularly scheduled data mine videos. With Lunar New Year occurring at the end of this month, we'll have a lot of Chinese updates as well as rewards. Last update, we got new augment modules for the Choho class light cruisers. In addition to adding stats, increasing gun efficiencies, improving barrages, and adding a slash, this augment module also does an interesting change by adding a special anti-air gun and improved AA efficiency. Given that Yingsui and Choho previously had no anti-air gun slot and thus just use the 50% efficiency default anti-air gun, this allows a lot more survivability for these two ships against planes. Moving on to today's update, we get the Happy Lunar New Year 2025 Spring Festival Special Invitation. This one actually gives us some interesting ship choices, especially for new players who've missed previous events. One of these includes San Yuan, whose special missile destroyer retrofit item, Seal of the Black Tortoise, is now going to be added permanently to the prototype shop. Her sisters Anshan and Shun will be easily obtainable through their rerun events that are returning during this time period. In fact, Fushu will actually finally get her retrofit item, Seal of the Vermilion Bird. All I can say is I actually called it this time in a recent video. And all the Chinese missile destroyers. There are actually technically only 3 of them. The 4th one, Fushan, is not a retrofit yet, so she technically is eligible for this video. However, I'd be shocked if she doesn't get one in the near future. Also, as is tradition for Azur Lane during Lunar New Year, we're going to be rerunning the Manju Resort. So you'll be able to collect red envelopes that will randomly give you different amounts of gems when you open them. Outside the anniversary events, Lunar New Year is one of the most generous time periods from Manju to Azur Lane players. This is one of the best times to make sure you are logging into the game if you're not already a daily login warrior. Most of the previous Lunar New Year stuff will be rerun, like dorm themes and skins. But enough of that, let's get into the new events that we haven't seen before coming today. The major one being the Spring Fashion Festa. This is going to be a joint operation, which basically means it's going to be one of those world boss events, where you fight with your server to defeat the boss, and if you do, you get rewards and contribution points. In addition to 15 daily easy, medium, and hard fights, there will be EX tickets that are the most important to collect and fight. We had an event very similar to this last Lunar New Year. The accumulation rewards this year include a 533mm quadruple torpedo mount Mk35 Tier 0 design. This is a pretty decent US homing torpedo with a small spread and can hit submarines. However, it's already very easy to get in the gear lab, so most people already have a copy. The other reward is definitely more worth it and more rare, the SY-1A missile. You'll need this for your newly retrofitable missile destroyers. And man, is this missile so much better than the free one that you can get in the shop every month. So make sure that you contribute to this fight so that you can get this item. It's not a new item, but previously there was only one event where you could get it and you could only get one. Also, this Spring Fashion Festa event will have a commemorative album where you can get an exclusive medal. So don't forget that if you're interested. There's also going to be a big overhaul to who is in the general construction pools. A couple Chinese ships will be permanently added to them, but a whole lot of ships are going to be removed from the construction pools. Don't worry, these ships will still be readily available, either via the Metal Shop, Guild Shop, Merit Shop, or Core Data Shop. Think we got enough shops yet? Regardless, this is going to be actually a good thing for players as it decreases the available pool and thus increases your chances at a specific ship in that pool. Of course, you can get the ships that were removed from the pool by just playing the game and collecting the resources you need in their respective shops. Also, we have some research updates. The catch-up blueprint system is going to come to PR6. Additionally, PR6 content is going to be added to the rookie research missions. In the prototype shop, the PR7 prints are going to replace the PR5 and 4 prints that are there. Hindenburg's gun is going to be added to the shop, which is good because Hindenburg herself wants 2 of the triple 203mm SKC prototype heavy cruiser gun. Finally, PR5 and DR4 ships are now going to be able to be enhanced with coins. This milestone is how you know a PR ship is old. Does this addition mean that a gear has a fate simulation? Absolutely not. We're still waiting on that. This event includes a bunch of new skins, L2Ds and dynamic motions alike. In fact, one of these skins has both. Azur Lane is revealing the dual form skin today. This new type of skin contains 2 different dynamic animation /L2D forms. In this case, a front and a back. Each form has its own unique set of lines, so it truly is a different skin. You can switch between these 2 skins by clicking a switch button. button. The price of this new type of skin is going to be 1,680 gems. As a price comparison, dynamic motion skins are 980 gems, and L2D skins are between 1,080 gems and 1,200 gems. So it's like they're bundling two skins and giving you a slight discount. But of course, they're forcing you to buy both of them together, even if you only want one. Although, according to a poll on my channel, a clear majority of you are happy with this addition, and nearly all of the discontent comes from the pricing. This skin will be rentable, so you can test it out for free before you buy it, although I think it's a loss that Chien Wu is the first ship to get this type of skin. This skin type seems perfectly made for something like Emden, which has multiple variants theoretically you could switch between, although Dark Emden, Best Emden. And with that, let's get into the new ships. We'll have 4 new ships and 2 new retrofits to go over today. Let's start off with the first ship that's not in the gacha, Fupo. You can obtain her by just logging in for her event, so she should be the easiest ship to obtain. She is an elite Chinese destroyer and her stats fit. But as we know, skills are where these ships thrive. Skill number 1, she gets plus 10% torpedo stat. Also, every 20 seconds, there's a 70% chance to launch a special barrage, and you randomly select an enemy to receive one of the 3 listed debuffs, either negative 20% firepower and torpedo stat, or negative 20% anti-air and evasion, or she applies special armor break. This armor break does stack with other armor breaks because it has its own unique ID, so with 5% extra damage, this is almost certainly the one that you want to trigger, which is good because instead of these 3 options having equal weights, there's a 60% chance to apply the armor break, while only a 20% chance to apply the other 2 effects. If you have another Chinese ship in the fleet, the trigger rate for this skill is 100% instead of 70%, but because of the RNG factor, it's more like 60% anyway. But overall, this is kind of a fun skill to apply armor break with an elite destroyer. Skill number 2, every 15 seconds after the start of the battle, there's a 70% chance for a firecracker to set off. Allied Vanguard ships hit by this are going to get a special burn. They're only going to take 1 damage every 2 seconds for 8 seconds, so a total of 4 damage, but during those 8 seconds, they're going to get 10% crit rate boost. This is a really fun skill for boosting. Obviously not great, but very fun. Finally, she's going to have an all-out assault. The ship is a lot of fun. I like the design. Not a good ship, though. A lot of things that do this, but better. All right, now that we're done with that, let's move into the gacha ships. We'll start with Fupo's sister, Chang Feng. Stat-wise, she's even slightly worse. Skill number 1, she's going to get a 20% boost to her torpedo stat. If there is another Chinese ship in your fleet, she's going to get 10% boost to her damage. Every 20 seconds, she's going to trigger a special barrage as well as 2 effects. Effect 1, she's going to get 10% boost to her crit rate for 10 seconds. And effect 2 is that she's going to create a shield for all other Chang Feng class ships in the fleet that can block up to 6 shells and decreases the speed of those ships by 1. It lasts for 10 seconds. Skill number 2, all Chinese ships are going to get minus 5% damage taken and 2 seconds reduced from their burn duration. If a Vanguard fleet ship is burning, clear all Vanguard fleet's burning effects and trigger a special barrage. All the Vanguard fleet gets plus 10 luck for the next 9 seconds, and there is a 15-second cooldown between these activations. While it technically says 10 on the skill, the actual game is treating it as 1. We'll see if there's an update to match these and which one is the actual correct proper one. This is actually one of the best anti-burn skills in the game. It just takes off all the burn and it's awesome. Its cooldown's actually pretty low, so every 15 seconds you're just gonna wipe all of the burn status effects. She also gets an all-out assault. Overall, this ship looks really good for an elite. It's obviously designed really well to go with her sister Fupo. Fupo will give the buffs and then burn them, but also this ship will clean off those burns. Additionally, they'll give each other buffs for both being Chinese ships, and she'll also give shields to her sister as well. So a lot of synergy between the 2 ships. I also find it really funny that they are mildly hurting each other, as siblings do. Chang Feng reduces the speed of Fupo. Fupo literally will burn Chang Feng. Let me know in the comments if this phenomenon is related to something historical. And let's move on to the other elite, the light cruiser Hwah Jah. This ship actually reminds me a lot of Ying Sui, where she doesn't have an anti-air gun slot. She's got a main gun +1, plus an auxiliary gun, plus a torpedo slot, so she's got a lot of damage, but she does not have a lot of survivability. Maybe she'll get a retrofit someday like Ying Sui got recently that fixes that. Interestingly Interestingly enough, her stats are actually a lot better than Ying Sui, so she's going to be able to do more damage and have more survivability than base default Ying Sui. Of course, she's going to have that base pitiful 20 speed that is just brutal. Ying Sui helped fix that with a skill that increased her speed by 5, but it still hurt. She's slow. And Haiyun is just as slow. All right, let's move into the skills. Skill number 1, plus 15% firepower and reload stat. That's nice. Every 15 seconds, there's a 70% chance to launch a special barrage, and enemies hit by this barrage are going to be slowed by 20% for 8 seconds, and it does not stack. The barrage ain't bad. It has HE ammo, but pierces, ignores shields, and has shrapnel. But of course, the non-guaranteed trigger hurts, and while having a slow is nice, 20% is not necessarily a lot of slow. Skill number 2, she gets plus 8 speed, so her speed is basically 28. Still slow, but better. It's actually better than Ying Sui. She also gets plus 20% evasion and anti-air. This is much needed for survivability because she is squishy based on her base stats. I don't see a damage reduction though, so that hurts. When this ship falls below 75% HP for the first time, she heals all the Vanguard by 5% of their HP, so that actually can have some abuse if you have a high HP Vanguard ship paired with her. She's also pretty squishy, so she's probably going to be the first ship to drop below 75% HP, and this is a good heal. This is a fairly usable elite ship. She's basically a upgraded version of Ying Sui. And importantly, she doesn't have to sortie with any other Chinese ships to get her to work. Alright, moving on to the last ship in the gacha, the SR heavy cruiser Chien Wu. And while she may officially be an SR, her stats look much worse than that. Her firepower is lower than common heavy cruisers that are droppable. It's more akin to a destroyer than a heavy cruiser, truly. Her equipment setup is where she gets interesting. She gets a heavy cruiser gun for her main gun, but then she gets a light cruiser gun for her auxiliary gun. She also has an auxiliary gun +1, and she has torpedoes with a preloaded set. So she gives up her anti-air, but she gets to have all the extra DPS equips. This is kind of like Hindenburg, which is a rainbow rarity ship, so this is interesting for certain. It somewhat makes up for her poor stats, presuming you are doing content where she can easily survive. Skill number 1, plus 15% to firepower and hit stat. Nice. After this ship kills an enemy, plus 10 speed for the rest of the battle. That puts her at 38 speed, which is the highest of any heavy cruiser. Of course, she has to kill something first, so that's a downside, but interesting. I like it. We actually have a kind of a fast heavy cruiser. Every 4 times this ship fires her secondary guns, remember that has a secondary gun +1, so she's basically shooting it twice each time it triggers. She gets plus 4% damage, just straight damage. This stacks 3 times, so that's up to 12% extra damage. She's also going to trigger a special barrage. Enemies hit by this barrage will take 8% more damage from allied Chinese ships for 10 seconds. So you're going to want to put a very fast-firing light cruiser gun on her, and then she'll be able to trigger that really quickly, get up to 12% damage, and then hopefully you trigger that barrage, which is going to give her an extra 8% damage because she's Chinese, so that's a 20% damage buff right there. It also can apply to other Chinese ships if you have them in the fleet as well. Her barrage also looks decent. It has torpedoes with it too, so that's nice. Skill number 2, she reduces her torpedo damage taken by 20%. If that just said damage taken, that would be great, but only torpedo damage. She also gets plus 20% evasion stat. If that's the evasion rate, that would be amazing. So some keywords there that make this a lot worse than it could have been, but 20% is nothing to scoff at, even though the limitations are there. At the start of the battle, she creates a 5% HP barrier for 15 seconds, so she has a shield helping with survivability. She's going to need it. She's a very squishy heavy cruiser so far. When this ship's HP drops below 50%, plus 10% evasion rate, and she creates a 15% HP barrier for 15 seconds. This is a max trigger of once per battle, but that evasion rate looks like it is going to be permanent. So she gets a barrier at the start of the battle. She gets a barrier when her HP gets low enough. Also, when other Vanguard ships' HP drops below 50%, so this is not her, but anyone else in the Vanguard fleet, she's going to spawn 2 shields around that ship. This triggers once per ship. Each shield blocks 10 shields and lasts 15 seconds. So theoretically, you can trigger this twice if both of your other ships' in the Vanguard fleet are going to drop below 50%, so more survivability there. Great. If a shield is granted to Dragon Emperor ship or a Chinese ship, that ship and this ship get minus 10% damage taken until the end of the battle. So if you pair her with a full Chinese Vanguard, she's going to get damage taken reduction when anyone else in the fleet drops below 50% HP. So there's a lot of survivability added to this skill, just straight survivability. Like, this is just meant to keep her alive, which is really nice because she needs it. And the first skill is actually really good because it's just going to give her a lot of extra damage. Both of these have some synergy with Chinese ships, but not overly reliant on it. Like, you don't need to take her with Chinese ships to be good. She also has an all-out assault that's pretty good. So overall, this ship's actually very interesting. It obviously does better in a Chinese fleet technically, but it can be used outside of Chinese fleet. I think this is probably the most powerful ship in the banner, but all the ships have been pretty interesting so far because Hwah Jah has been a better Ying Sui. This is like a heavy cruiser. This is actually better than Hwah Jah, so this is even better than Ching Sui, but this is kind of an interesting setup because we just kind of give up our anti-air gun to get all this extra DPS and then just rely on these like skills that are kind of busted if you think about them with the damage reductions that they have. It's just like they're on a weak ship, so they kind of need it. And then yeah, we have like Chang Feng, which is just like a really interesting niche anti-fire ship that could be useful in a lot of things that relate to fire. And yeah, I mean, there's nice synergy between the destroyers. There's a lot of really cool things going on with these 4 ships. None of them are meta per se, but I mean, Chien Wu does not hurt to be used at all. Like, she can be used in a lot of things, I think. And Chang Feng, I'm confident that someone's going to be like, oh, there's so much fire, I'm just going to bring Chang Feng and it fixes it. Especially if you're like newer player and you're struggling in some of those fire maps and whatnot. That's a nice pickup there. But overall, I think these are all well designed, well crafted, and all very usable. But we have 2 retrofits that we saved for last because I'm probably most excited about reading these retrofits over the new ships even. Let's get into them. All right, the first retrofit is going to be Hwah Jah, an elite light aircraft carrier that's going to become an SR ship. So a big part of this upgrade is she's going to pick up 60 aviation stat, and instead of having to use seaplanes, she can now use fighters in all of her slots, and in her second slot, which has 3 mounts, she can use a torpedo bomber or a dive bomber. So now she's going to be able to use 6 planes, which is the most of any Chinese carrier. Even post retrofit, Chenhai can only use 5. So while she does still have to have her anti-air gun, so she's going to be more like some of the weaker light aircraft carriers and, you know, only have 6 planes rather than some of the other ones that have like 8, 9, etc. This is actually pretty good that she can use good planes and has better stats. She's also going to pick up some airplane efficiency with this retrofit, going from 140% to 150%, so that's nice. And then the final addition she's going to get is a retrofit skill that reads, if there are any other carriers, light carriers, or Chinese ships in the fleet, she's going to get plus 10% slot efficiency to her first and second slots, which means that her airplanes will have 160% efficiency. Also, every 10 seconds after the battle starts, and every 5 seconds after this ship finishes loading an airstrike, she launches a special area barrage that has a slow of 20% for enemies hit by it for 10 seconds. A slow is nice. It's not particularly a great slow because it's only 20 seconds, but it is occurring a lot. These are going to be 3 FBA 19 planes that are launching. These are seaplanes. They are very weak planes, but this is actually occurring a lot. I wish it occurred when it loaded an airstrike rather than 5 seconds afterwards, so that if you're playing on auto, she can kind of give the slow before your planes launch, but oh well. She's still going to get it at the 10 and 20 second mark, which is perfect. This retrofit is really good for Hwah Jah. In fact, this makes her the best carrier in the Chinese fleet, which is not saying much. She doesn't have a lot of competition there. But if you wanted to have a mono Chinese fleet and you needed a carrier for some ACV value, this would be your best option. Don't get me wrong, there's probably 100 carriers better than this, but if you're working in the Chinese faction, you don't have a lot of carriers to work with, so this is what you got. Very interesting ship. The new art for this retrofit is also interesting. All right, last but not least, the ship we've all been waiting for. Hwah Fu Shu's retrofit. I feel like I've been waiting for this retrofit for like 3 years. She's going to become a missile destroyer, just like the rest of her sisters. We finally finished the full Anshan class. We have 4 missile destroyers. I just like this mechanic. It's the only ship class that can be used in the Vanguard or the main fleet. And because now we finally have 4 of them, fun fact, it is now the only ship class in Azur Lane that you can bring more than 3 of in the same fleet. Alright, as with most retrofits, she gets a lot of stat boosts. As with the missile destroyer change, she gets a lot of things that allows her to get extra HP when she's in the main fleet. It allows her to get missiles. It changes her equipment that she has for efficiencies and all that sort of things. Like, a lot of things change with this. You should be familiar with this if you've watched Anshan's, Cheng Cheng's, or Taiyun's retrofits that I've talked about. Missile destroyers are good, straight up. We'll leave it at that. So let's get into the skill changes. Alright, her first skill, instead of just giving her plus 20% main gun crit rate, she's going to get plus 20% missile crit rate, which is really good. And then she's just going to get straight stat boosts. Kind of boring, but plus 12% to firepower, torpedo, and reload stat. Those are the ones she wants. She's got a main gun plus 1 now. Missiles trigger off the torpedo stat, so those are good, and reload obviously is reload. So we like those. It's simple, it's basic. Unfortunately, it only buffs her, so Anshan and Chang Cheng buff the class in general, but Taiyun and Fu Shun buff only themselves. Alright, skill number 2 is the typical Anshan missile destroyer skill. It changes a little bit. There are different variants for each one. This one has some interesting changes. Outside of just gaining the missile strike, her burn damage reduction is minus 80% instead of minus 15% like her sisters, so more burn oriented. And then her sisters all do different things. This is the variant that changes, but her barrage that happens every 15 seconds is actually going to trigger a special barrage that burns them with a special burn, so it can stack on other burns. That's 102 damage every second for 15 seconds, so that's over 1500 damage in total. It's a lot of burn. So she's focused on burn reduction, burn damage. You know, Taiyun does shields, Anshan does armor break, Chang Cheng does torpedo damage increase. So each of the sisters is a little bit different. This burn is definitely interesting. I like it. She also gets a change to her all-out assault that basically just modifies based on which position in the fleet you put her. But most importantly, we have to talk about this barrage that she gets. So all of the missile destroyers get a barrage when they get upgraded and retrofitted. Traditionally, you'd think Anshan and Chang Cheng would be the better ones because their skills actually synergize with the whole faction, so they can kind of stack buffs with each other. However, I said in my last retrofit video that Taiyun might in fact be the best one because she got a special barrage that is much more powerful than the other two. So while she can't buff any other ships besides herself, she does get a barrage that's much more powerful. Fu Shun also has a skill that only buffs herself and none of her friends, and she also gets an enhanced barrage that's much better than the other two that buff their friends. She gets an 800 damage barrage that has shrapnel, piercing, ignores shields, ignores bombs, and has a component that's able to re-aim. She certainly matches really well with the other missile destroyers. She might be one of the better ones because she has the enhanced barrage similar to Taiyun, which made her really good, and instead of shields, she actually gets a really powerful burn. She's probably the standalone go-to if you need just one that can deal a lot of damage. If you need one that's a little bit more survivable, you can go with Taiyun instead. Or if you want to use all 4, use all 4 because they are all great ships. You can put Chang Cheng in the back and then put the other 3 in the front. Chang Cheng probably is the one that most likely to go in the back. You want Taiyun and Fu Shun to be in the front. If you want to go full Chinese, you can actually split because you're probably going to need to put 2 in the back. You need to probably put Chang Cheng and Anshan in the back. You can put Taiyun and Fu Shun in the front. And then you can add one of the Chinese carriers like Hwah Jah retrofit to the back line, and Harbin, she's a really good Chinese ship, to the front line. In fact, if you don't need a carrier in your fleet, you can actually bump Hwah Jah off, move Fu Shun from the front to the back, and it gives you an open slot in your Vanguard fleet, which you can fill with Yatsen, because post-retrofit, Yatsen doesn't need Ninghai to be good anymore, so that's great. So the Chinese fleet is actually pretty good, especially if you don't care about the opposing air power. So adding Fu Shun to the mix is really good for the Chinese faction. This faction got a big upgrade for its meta variant, which is with the missile destroyers, and it got a couple other upgrades for the purity variants that are needed and some of the fun stuff. There's a couple niche stuff here, so overall, a lot of new ships are cool. The 2 retrofits, definitely much needed. We have the best Chinese carrier, and I think probably the best missile destroyer. The missile destroyers are so close to each other in terms of what they do, and obviously mixing and matching them is also really good. good, so you're going to be using multiple missile destroyers. Make sure you pick up the SY-1A missile from this event. That is crucial to making your missile destroyers more powerful. It's also a very limited item. Speaking of items, this event brings a new item for us as well. This item is called Fupo's Flawless Plan, and you can get it through the personal rewards from accumulating points. So it should be pretty easy to obtain, but it is limited to this event. It's your standard elite HP item, but it's the skill we care about here. When equipped by Fupo, Fei Yun, or Fu Shun, the equipped ship gets plus 5% torpedo stat and heals herself 2% HP 30 seconds after the battle starts. So we really don't care about Fupo and Fei Yun because they're bad ships, but this can be applied to Fu Shun, and it can boost her torpedo stat. That is awesome. Fu Shun also needs HP to survive if she's in the Vanguard. That's typically where you want your missile destroyers anyway, and it gives her a heal. Interesting enough that this can only go on Fu Shun and it can't go on any of her sisters. So unlike the Seal of the Four Gods auxiliary equipment that you're going to equip to every Anshan class ship, this can only go on Fu Shun, which is interesting because it kind of changes the analysis of which is the best missile destroyer. This one now gets a boost to torpedo stat on top of what she was already getting, and it also gives her a heal. So this actually is a must pick up item if you're going to use Fu Shun. Fu Shun is also a missile destroyer, which is a meta ship. This retrofit is pretty good. It's one of the better missile destroyers, and this item is going to be something you're going to want to equip to her almost lock and loaded. I mean, Seal of the Four Gods is better, but you do have 2 auxiliary slots, so you can slot both in. This is a must pick up item, ironically, just like a freebie elite item that is going to be good. Sometimes that happens when we have these Chinese events. These elites sometimes get very interestingly good. So anyway, that's the only equipment we have. That's the full event. It's a short, minor event, but there's a lot of good things in here. A lot of exciting things for meta things, as well as just for niche things, as well as just for like making Chinese ships more usable and better in general. The kits are really fun. There's a lot of synergies between the ships. Of course, this is Lunar New Year, so this is exciting for skins. The game files spoiled something they didn't share on Twitter or any of the official files anywhere, and that is there's going to be a Lunar New Year specific New Jersey skin, so that was unexpected. So there are fun things like that that come in this. Obviously, free gems. Make sure to log in, collect all your red envelopes. Those are just free gems. We get the new skin type, which I'm curious to see what they do. I'm sure if it's successful monetarily during this, it will come back a lot again and again for other ships. I don't think I'm going to buy this variant, but if they bring it for Emden or something else, I'm very much going to be interested. So yeah, anyway, good event. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoy this event, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care of yourselves. 再见.